a grading system itself is pushing students away from the desire to learn, and it's pushing them into a desire just to get an A or whatever grade's going to push them up into the next level of the school they want to go to.
Welcome back to Shifting Schools, or if you are a first-time listener, welcome for the first time. We're glad you're here. Let's start today with a question. Have you found yourself wondering just how tech can truly enhance language learning and empower your multi-language learners? Well, today's guest, Brent Warner, might give you that one idea that you need to spark the use of generative AI with your language learners. Today, we dive into the game-changing world of Gen AI and how it's helping English language learners engage more deeply with language, breaking down barriers that teachers and students have been up against for years. Brent explores the concept of endless practice, where learners can use AI to build vocabulary and practice language skills without the wait for class time, enhancing both engagement and retention. We'll also discuss the art of prompt engineering and how teachers can guide students to take charge of their learning, crafting questions that give them meaningful, real-time feedback. Brent even shares insight from his work on AI action plans, showing us the potential for AI not just in the classroom, but in shaping more inclusive, supportive educational environments. Our guest today, Brent Warner, is an award-winning community college professor specializing in tech-forward language learning. He co-hosts the Diesel podcast, where he discusses innovations in ESOL, and he's also a dedicated TESOL international blogger. Brent's mission is all about helping students and teachers leverage technology to communicate better and bridge educational gaps. Now, before we turn it over to Brent, here is a quick word from today's show sponsors. Shifting Schools is excited to be sponsored by newlight.io. Their platform is designed to simplify MTSS frameworks for personalized student support. Built by leading experts, Newlight focuses on getting educators the answers they need fast. Which students need which levels of support? With simple data collection and insightful analytics powered by AI, Newlight's platform provides actionable solutions to support your students effectively. Try it for free at newlight.io. That's NEULIGHT.io. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. Hey folks, FETC, that's the Future of Education Technology Conference, is just around the corner, happening January 14th through 17th, 2025 in Orlando. It's your chance to be part of the first and best EdTech event of the year. As a special offer, just for the Shifting Schools community, you can use promo code SHIFTING10 at checkout for an extra 10% off and all access or session passes. Head to FETC.org to register today, save, and get ready to bring the future of education into your school. That's SHIFTING10, all caps, SHIFTING10 at FETC.org for an additional 10% off. Offer ends December 13th. Now, let's get into this Gen AI conversation with Brent Warner. All right, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. I'm so pumped today to be here with Brent Warner, mostly because Trisha and I stalk him over on LinkedIn. And if you're a LinkedIn user, by the end of today's conversation, you're going to want to go send a friend request. Poor Brent, you're going to be inundated with friend requests
I'll take it
after this. So the stuff you're sharing over on LinkedIn is pretty incredible. You're also, you've got a new book coming out. You're also the co-host of the Diesel podcast. And you're a professor at a community college. And so, you know, much like all of us, you've got your hands in a lot of different things. But as a professor, when it comes to this intersection of AI and education, your big focus is multilingual learners. What excites you most about just where we are with this idea of multilanguage learners, AI, education, kind of where are you at right now with all this?
I think the thing that gets me the most excited is the possibility for students to take more control over their learning. Multilingual learners coming in at our program, it's still called an ESL program. So we've got the students coming in, and I'm based in Southern California, and even here, we get students coming from all over the world to come to the community college and prep their English so that they can go to university, or we've got our adult ed programs. But I always ask my students, I'm like, well, how much time are you speaking English outside of the classroom? And the answer is like none, or like very little, even though they're in America. And it's like, okay, well, when I go to Starbucks or when I go wherever, but they're, kind of tied in with their families and their communities, which totally makes sense. So it's something that happens regularly, but the students all want more opportunity to speak, all want more opportunity to practice. And so if my class is twice a week, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, then if they have a question for me on Thursday afternoon, then they're going to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then back to Tuesday. It's 5 more days until they get a chance to talk to someone again. And so now I'm sitting here going, well, this AI stuff lets them have an endless partner to practice with, whether they're using, so I've been playing with, the voice options or just the typing options, but they can keep practicing things and not necessarily have to wait for the quote unquote professional teacher just to get some feedback on something. We know research clearly shows the faster you get feedback on something, the more likely you are to hold that in, to keep the learning for longer, right? And so the ability for students to instantly get that feedback, have an opportunity to produce more language, that to me is a really exciting aspect of what the AI can do.
I love that. And you had a blog post over at the TOESL.org website, and we'll make sure there's links to it in the show notes, where you talked about using AI to build vocabulary and these 3 different approaches. Can you kind of talk through this idea of broad prompting and some of these prompting techniques that you're teaching some of your ESL kids?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's definitely, lots of different ways to play with these things, right? So for the vocabulary conversation, right, I do have this kind of idea, it's just out there, but like, if you put in a prompt, I think and you have this, so it'll be in the show notes so people can copy this later, but I'll kind of explain it through, which is, you could start with a prompt that says something along the lines of, I'm an intermediate ESL student trying to learn new words. I'm going to provide you with a list of vocabulary words. Please quiz me until I show an understanding of 80% of the words. And then you kind of follow up with that. So you can kind of have a second part. I said, like, make sure that I understand 80% of the words on the list, not 80% of the questions you ask, right?
Yeah.
The fine tuning that you got to kind of get with the AI stuff, right? And then please continue until I'm successful or until I close the chat. And then you give them the list, you give the, ChatGPT or whatever you're going to be using, you give it that list. And then the students then have, the big part about all of these is the patience and the fact that the students don't feel the pressure of like, oh, a teacher's breathing down my neck to get these words right, or they're getting bored listening to me kind of do these regular level vocabulary words, but to them it's not interesting, right? So students worry about these things when they're interacting with teachers, but as soon as you move it to an AI conversation, now it's like, well, there's nobody there. Like, we know that, fundamentally. And so even though we have all these conversations about like, hey, this is, what's the human level of this, right? All these things, but fundamentally we know it's not a real person. And so that endless patience and that endless ability to kind of keep working with something without the frustration of someone else, hovering over you. This is why, I'll talk in presentations about, the Mario effect. If you go back to the old day of playing Super Mario Brothers and trying to jump to the top of that flagpole, right? Is like, you would do that 100 times, really just trying to get it. And like, as kids, like if you're my age roughly, you remember resetting the game just to get, on level 1-1, right? You'd be, I'm going to jump again. I need to get that highest score, right? And then you kind of, you do these things because you're intrinsically motivated to get that thing that you want. And so for students, when they're doing it this way, they're not getting the pressure of some outside source saying you're not good enough, or even if it's kind of like, hidden and under the surface, or just like the boredom of a teacher looking at their watch or checking their phone or whatever else happens.
So true.
All of that stuff's gone, right? And
Yeah.
so now we just have the opportunity to focus on the learning. And then the teacher can accommodate that, of course, right? But you can set this up with this idea of like, hey, this is something kind of big that I just want you to help me out with as we go. Then you can move it into, more specific words. Like if you wanted it to really focus in on particular needs, I did changing that conversation in that same prompt. It's like, hey, mix the orders of the words, give me synonyms and other examples to kind of keep working with. And so, the more that students have an understanding of the things they're trying to learn, the more they can talk to these things and kind of get that feedback. And so then it becomes a teacher is really that guide on the side. Many of us who love the PD world, right? It's like for years we've been doing that guide on the side versus sage on the stage conversation. But now you can kind of go, well, I can really be guide on the side and just show you how to interact with these things, and then use that for your own leverage and use however you think is appropriate. And so being able to hand off that responsibility to the students is a big deal to me too.
And how much time in your class are you having to spend? Like, what's your class structure look like when you are teaching kids these prompt engineering skills? Are you spending a lot of time now looking at like teaching them to prompt engineer? Are you doing I call them starter prompts, where you've basically created the outline of the prompt and then they have to fill in they have to copy and paste their list over. They have to, customize it and personalize it for them. Kind of how are you teaching these skills with your students?
Yeah, you can do all of those. So it's definitely start with just cut and paste and just start talking to it, right? Because they will want to get them started with just feeling comfortable with interacting with these things, and you don't have to do anything up on your side. Just go. So that's kind of where it starts, and then depending on your goals, right, you can actually build a lot of these conversations into language learning opportunities, right? So you could say, you can start teaching students sentence stems, for example, right? Can you make this blank, right? And then that blank becomes, a comparative adjective, easier, right? Whatever it is, right? And so depending if they're really more beginner levels, you start with simple sentence stems. If they're more advanced students, you can start kind of, talking to them about the language skills that they want to get. But the truth is, you're really talking about actual language and communication skills while they're interacting with this AI, right? And so a lot of people are complaining and saying, well, AI takes away that critical thinking. And I'm like, hold on a second. We're really talking about deep level communication, because the responses that we get may or may not be what we're looking for. And so then we have to kind of do some readjustments to that conversation, figure out what's going on, think carefully about what's working, what's not, right? And then adjust the way that you're presenting your language to do all of that. So, so to me, I'm like, you guys are building language every time you're interacting with these things, whether you're just cutting and pasting something in and doing the talk, or whether you're starting to create prompts. And then you can move on to even further levels on like, okay, I want you to start creating games and understanding, if then relationships, which is, linguistic, right? But then also turns out in the game to be able to, make variability in the game or whatever else they're doing.
I love this. Educators, are you searching for a new space to connect, collaborate, and grow? Well, Camp Shifting Schools is your new home. With the decline of X, formerly Twitter, we're here to offer a safe, welcoming community where you can join other passionate teachers. Take part in free courses, webinars, and live AMA sessions to evaluate your practice. Ready to join the conversation? Head over to camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the camp community today. Learning and connecting awaits. Teaching English through prompts. I think there's a whole thing there of just what are some of the switches we in education need to think differently around where the learning is happening. And everything you just explained was there's all this learning that's happening, but it's learning in the formation of prompts. Like we can do all this language acquisition through now this new medium, which for better or for worse, we're all going to need to know at some point anyway. And so how do we teach kids to learn the skill of prompting and all of these linguistical parts of making a really good prompt? Because if you don't have a really good prompt, it's not a very good tool. Right. It's not a very good tool. There's a difference. There's a reason why there's different weights to hammers. My other job is right home. My wife and I have a rental company. So there's a difference between a 10 ounce hammer and a 12-ounce hammer. There's a difference between a 12-ounce hammer and a 16-ounce hammer. And if you don't know, and you're grabbing the wrong tool, you're working way too hard. Right. But this idea that I'm always in my presentations and when I'm doing my PD is trying to get teachers to understand that there's a lot of learning that happens in creating the prompt. And how do we think about moving our quote unquote assessment or our quote unquote learning into this prompt generation and not seeing it as a waste of time?
Mm-hmm.
For some teachers, that's kind of a heavy lift. I don't know.
It is. No, I mean, you definitely see resistance to these ideas, right? We can get into this. It gets a little dark, but I mean, there's a certain amount of like people trying to protect their jobs, which I understand, right?
Yeah.
There's fear around that. Although in my perspective, it's like, we just need to start pivoting and moving to the next level of our job, right? And so, those conversations do continue to exist though. But what you can do is, once you start working with it, you can actually have students send you prompts, and then your job as the teacher then becomes to interact with with whatever prompts they made, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, well now I get a C. So it's turning it around, and you're saying, hey, this is what's going on when I'm interacting with it, and you can share that backwards, right? So we talk about that idea where, if a student is learning something, then them becoming the teacher is one of the best ways to, solidify that actual learning. Okay, well, now we have an opportunity for them to be the teacher by creating these prompts that are going to be useful, and we can play with it too. We can actually have some fun depending on what they're building for those things. So I think a lot of it is just kind of breaking the habit of saying, well, learning is boring and, whatever else that is, and going, oh, hold on, what about all these cool things that we can do now? It's pretty powerful.
I agree with you. And I love your idea, because I think you're spot on, and not just with multilanguage learners, but this idea of when you are talking with a bot, and we take that human, aka teacher, standing over your shoulder saying, are you done yet? Are you done yet? And even though you're not saying that, you don't have to say that as a teacher, right? There's all these, non-verbal communications that we give off. There's all of these, like, I need to hurry, or I'm dumber than the kid sitting next to me because my list is different, or all of these things that happen that are taken away when the machine never gets tired of giving you another try. Like, it never gets tired. It never gets tired of waiting for you to get it. And I think there's so much we can take away, that we've been looking for something like this, I feel like, in education for a really long time, and we finally have it. And now that we have it, we're just like, I don't know if I like this thing, But I do think there's a lot there for it, is sure.
For sure, like the differentiated instruction conversation. It's like, this is what we've been told to do our entire careers. Nobody has ever been able to do it or to live up to this crazy expectation. Now we have the tool to do it, and people are like, not so sure. It's like, what are you talking about?
I'm not so sure I want to do it.
It's like, this
you
is
can adjust
amazing.
the reading level on any piece of reading, on any piece of literature. You can adjust the reading level for your kids in under 10 seconds. Like, every kid in your class is at their reading level. And all of a sudden we're like, I don't know if I like this thing. I was like, but this is what we've been dreaming for.
Yeah, well, and then like going back to vocabulary too, is like, I'll do ones where, so there's one of these tools, I think it's called, GPT for Sheets or something like that. And you pay a little bit for it, but you can then run it, so you can have a spreadsheet of your students' names and the things that they're interested in. So I always do a survey at the beginning of the semester, collect a little bit of information about it. And then what you can do is you can pull from that spreadsheet information, and you can say, hey, use the student's name, make a story, right? Talk about this place where they're from, or talk about these people, these celebrities that they like, and make sure you include these 10 vocabulary words, but you're going to make a story about whatever it is, right? And then it's just a click of a button, and it will it will put that all right in a spreadsheet, and then you can do one more click of a button with like a mail merge and send it off to Google Docs for each student, so it just looks like a customized thing. And they're like, well, how did you make all this, we're all covering these same vocabulary words, but we're all getting custom stories that also match, even inside of one class. I might say, hey, this student needs a little easier level, this student needs a little bit more challenging level. And so you can push all of these things with way less time than it would have taken us in the past to write a single, paragraph that every student's going to get the same thing. And they're not even interested in the topics that I'm talking about. They're like, I don't care about that. Right. So
exactly.
Yeah. So all this customization is just, differentiation. All these things are amazing.
And then that puts you, again, being the guide on the side, because now you're walking around the classroom supporting each individual student as they're going through their individual learning, because you were able to set it up that way, right? And it's not you sitting at the top talking about whatever interests you, what might not interest them. Like they're going through it with theirs as well, which, again, there's so many ways when you go down that rabbit hole, and there's so many different ways that I think we can. And I call those like the small pivots. Like those are small things that can make a massive difference that we've been asking for in education for a long time.
For sure. I will say there is a complaint about it though, which is when you print out or when you get these different, stories, now you don't know where the vocabulary words are in everyone. So like, so you're like, I knew it was on the first line, but now it's on the 10th line or whatever else it is. So you have to do a little bit more paying attention, I guess, when you're giving feedback to your students.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's give and take in everything.
Worth it for me.
Well, your campus is part of the American Association of Colleges and Universities Institute on AI, pedagogy, and the curriculum. Can you talk maybe a little bit about what and how that partnership has led to you co-creating an AI action plan, and exactly what is an AI action plan?
Well, I think that's different for every campus. I think there's something like 134 colleges and universities, from, community colleges, private, and some of the big name universities. There's people coming and representing all across. But what they're doing, they kind of put us into these cohorts, right? So we're kind of paired up with the different groups of schools, whether their teams be quite small and trying to advocate on, because the school doesn't have a lot of buy-in, or whether their teams be larger and really kind of helping shape everything. It's really the goal of it is to help get people on process to building something. It's hard because when you say, hey, I'm going to build an AI action plan for our school or for our district or whatever else it is, this is something that has never actually existed before, right? And so it's not like you can run off of a template and say, well, it's just going to be kind of the same thing as XYZ. It's like, no, this touches deep into every part of life. We actually had one of our classified members came in to our meeting last week, and she was like asking some really interesting questions around AI and meetings, because I think you've seen these, now Hey Jen and some of these things are making fake avatars that you can send into a million Zoom meetings, right? And it's like, well, okay, what happens when these conversations start opening up, and how are we going to deal with it? Like, is that just a manager's decision to say, hey, an AI is cool, or is it a school-wide decision? So things like this, right? So it can go from classroom decisions all the way up to what the president is expecting. And we're trying to build our biggest goal, and these things exist out there, but is to build a campus use best practices guide across the different stakeholders' needs. So we're opening up the conversation. Of course, at the college level, professors have academic freedom to, teach in the ways that they see fit with the content of the materials they see fit. So we have to be very careful that we're not telling people you must do this and you must do that. And that's really not our intention. What our intention is to say, hey, here are the things that are possible. Here are the things that are problematic. So, for example, we talk about these AI checkers, and especially, I'm particularly passionate about it because it disproportionately impacts my language learning students, who then go on to be like, good workers in other classes. But if they get suddenly called out as being, hey, you did something wrong, because I checked it on a checker.
Yeah.
I used AI to check AI, and I don't
Yeah.
believe in AI, so we can't use the
Yeah.
AI. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, all this is
Yeah.
madness. But we need to sort these conversations out, right? And
Yeah.
so anyways, this is a lot of what we're doing is they're guiding us with the conversations and kind of saying, hey, you have a place to build. And then what we're doing on the local level is figuring out what that building looks like and needs to be for our purposes. So I like that flexibility in it, which is that it gives us the freedom to say, hey, we don't have to do what, Stanford's doing or UCLA is doing. We can kind of do the things that our teachers are seeing need for, that our staff members are seeing need for, and then address and respond to those. And we're doing like building a living document, because this stuff moves way too fast to say hey, these are going to be the rules forever. But it really is about trying, because many people want guidance, right? They're not, this like just free for all thing is very frustrating and anxiety inducing for a lot of people. And so they just want to say, hey, is it cool to do this? Is it not cool to do this? How do we approach? And then for me, there's another part, which is I like to believe that we hire people because we believe that they're good at their job and that they're, they have the student's best interest at heart and all of those things. And so there has to be also a certain level of trust where you just hand it off and say, we trust you to do this work. We're going to set you up with parameters and guidelines and things that might help you, but it doesn't mean that this is a top-down mandate. It's just a conversation to say, hey, if you're nerdy like me, you're going to get into it and read all these articles and go to these webinars and listen to the podcasts and everything. Yeah. But we all know that's not the reality for every teacher or every admin or whatever else it is. There's other things that take up other people's times, which is totally legitimate. And so how do you then bring that conversation to busy people on your own campus? And that's what we're working on.
And I mean, I agree with you. I think we're just looking for a lot of guidance. People want guidance. They want guidance documents. I mean, that's a lot of the work I've been doing, is helping states to create those guidance documents for K-12 schools. And as you kind of think about this, and again, our audience being K-12, are you starting to see through the creation of these action plans and stuff? Are we getting to a place that we are assuming kids are coming in with some AI background? Or do you think we're going to get to a place where we assume when students know how to write, that includes leveraging AI in appropriate and ethical ways?
Yeah. I think we're going to see this more and more. I don't know that I'm ready. I'm expecting to see it quite yet. We're still we're just hitting the 2-year mark since ChatGPT came out and everything. And so there's an interesting balance, which is we had interviewed students leaving the school and they complained that they didn't get AI training, right? So as they're moving into either jobs out of community college or moving into university, and it wasn't like a, mean complaints, but the way students talked about it is like, I need these things, and we're saying that we're prepared for the world, but what's going on? So the reality of the bureaucracy of even a community college is it takes a couple of years to get courses and trainings and certificates and all these things made. So one, we're seeing students leaving with wanting these skills already. So we're saying, okay, well, how do we match to that? When they're coming in, we're also starting to see some of these conversations. I'm not 100% sure yet, but my expectation, and this might be a little too pie in the sky, but my expectation is over the next 10 years is as this stuff becomes fully incorporated and not a novelty, but just a part of the regular process, is that then we are really going to start having conversations around why students are getting an education, right? And what is valuable to them when they come to college or when they graduate high school or all of these things. Because if it's just knowing stuff, that's not valuable to people anymore, right? If it's a question of I understand how to problem solve and I am flexible in my thinking and I can approach different ideas, those are the things that I'm going to start paying attention to students coming in. And I really think we're also going to start seeing a conversation around, what is learning and how are we showing our learning through this stuff too, because we are seeing a lot of complaints of teachers saying, well, hey, kids are just, using AI and uploading their assignments. And part of that conversation as well, what's happening in the class that makes them feel, that they need to cheat at whatever level. And it's not only in the class, right? We know that the reasons that students cheat is because they are stressed out from usually outside factors, right? High pressure from parents. I've got a part-time job or a full-time job, right, that I have to do, or, someone in my family has health problems, or I have health problems, and all of these things limit my time. And those are the things that end up leading to cheating conversations. But if we start talking about a bigger conversation around really shifting what the purpose of education is and saying, hey, the reason I'm here is to learn. It's not to just have information, but it's to learn and to build my thinking processes. And then we start saying, well, how is education accommodating that? Then we start looking at really different things. And, possibly we start looking at ideas of like, well, a grading system itself is pushing students away from the desire to learn, and it's pushing them into a desire just to get an A or whatever grade's going to push them up into the next level of the school they want to go to. And so if we start seeing shifts around that, then we're in some really interesting unexplored territory that a lot of people traditionally in the fringes have kind of said, hey, this is the better way to do it. Let's focus on learning instead of grades. But those conversations, even lots of well-meaning people, kind of get ignored, right? Because it's so much easier just to give a grade. So I am interested to see when students are coming through and they're really have built an understanding of learning for themselves instead of, chasing a grade for whatever purpose.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think we're going to have a lot of, there's just a lot of things we're going to have to rethink. I just think about just writing itself. I mean, Google Docs, and I live in a Google world, and most of the school districts I'm with are Google. I mean, a Google Doc already, you start to type a sentence and all you have to do is click tab and it'll ask you to like, is this what you mean? And you can finish the sentence. We're not that far off. And this is what I keep trying to tell teachers. I was like, that seems all well and good now, but you realize we're not that far off from a student typing 2 sentences and Gemini inside of a Google Doc saying, oh, is this what you're looking for? And write the next 4 paragraphs for you. And you're not going to be able to stop kids of just hitting the tab key. Like it's going to be part of the workflow. And if that's the new workflow, then what's the learning that we need kids to do? Because this is the new workflow to writing, thinking, processing, researching. I don't know, but I don't know. It's just this really interesting. We're all worried about, kids copying and pasting something out of AI. Well, what if I'm writing in a Google Doc and I can just click tab and it finishes the sentence and then it finishes the paragraph and then it'll cite itself because I'm going to ask it to, and it'll go find the research and all these things that it doesn't do well yet is not that far away.
Yeah. And I would even say it does do it well. It's just that we don't all have access to a lot of those things, these parts, right? And so it's like, it's already here, right? It's upon us. And it's just a question of like, when are students going to recognize that it's already there for them? When are teachers going to recognize that it's already happening, right? And then like, there are many people that are trying to figure these answers out, but it's moving faster than many of us can, it's hard for me to keep up, and I love this stuff. So
yeah. Hi folks. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. I want to talk a bit more about newlight.io, the AI FERPA compliant, that's our federal guidelines around privacy of student data, platform making personalized student support a breeze. Student privacy is huge in our schools, and New Light is big on privacy as well. It was one of the first questions I asked the co-founder, Jose, about. There are a few AI systems out there that meet the requirements to being FERPA compliant, and New Light does just that. New Light's IntelliTier platform is more than just a data collection tool. It's an AI-powered assistant that has been trained to truly understand the MTSS framework, student context, and school-specific resources. Developed by a team with both social, emotional, and behavioral needs in mind, and with plans to extend into academic support soon. Studies show effective MTSS and SEL implementations can boost attendance, improve grades, and increase graduation rates. Yet many schools struggle with the complexities of gathering data and turning that data into actionable items within the MTSS process. Newlight's IntelliTier platform makes it easy with simple, fast data collection, asynchronous collaboration across the MTSS team, and actionable insight that educators can implement and document their success with. Plus, Newlight is advised by seasoned educators and administrators, so they understand your everyday classroom challenges. You have to try it out for yourself. So head over to newlight.io to give it a try for free. That's NEULIGHT.io. Thank you to Newlight for taking this on, and a proud sponsor of the Shifting Schools community. Yeah, you and I are in it every single day, and it's just every day I'm like, how did I not know about, like, people will come to me and say, did you hear about this tool? I'm like, no, I probably have not heard of half the tools out there, because I can only learn about half the tools that are out there. Like, these things keep going. Yeah, it's so good. I'm excited about our third question, and you're always sharing great things over at LinkedIn, and I do need to put it on the record that Trisha does LinkedIn stalk you, so she wanted to make sure I made that into the thing. You share such great stuff, and you're so thoughtful with the stuff that you publish over on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure there's a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. But you had this great post recently that you did about a month ago around some work you were doing with redesigning rubrics or converting rubrics. And it's one place that I like to do a lot of thoughts with teachers around, okay, well, in a world of AI, we're going to have to assess differently. And part of that assessment is rethinking your rubrics. Can you kind of talk through this post for us? And again, we'll make sure we have a direct link to this post, but I would love for you to kind of talk through this post on what are you considering? How is this working for your students in the classroom?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we did a summer, PD thing with some of our colleagues around Joe Feldman's book, Grading for Equity, which is wonderful if you haven't read it. Really, definitely worth your time. I've done lots of sessions on just the concepts of, switching to a more equitable grading, strategy, but his ideas are really wonderful. And, before that, so, several years ago, I had a fairly actually a quite detailed rubric for a lot of assignments. So you would get, like, on a writing assignment, I teach an academic writing class, it'd be like, hey, it's 100-point assignment and you're getting, 15 points for your grammar, but you're going to, 5 of those points are going to be to show the past tense. And then, then you're going to get 1 point for having a good title, and, like, all these little things, right? Tiny little details, you're going on and on. And I started to realize that, like, when you're really, fine tuning on those, there's a part where you say, hey, that's kind of working like a checklist, but it's not actually equitable grading, because there's a lot of, biases and other problems that come in with these types of conversations. So I started to say, well, what if I switched to one of, Joe Feldman's structures here, with basically the 4-point, right? You're kind of in your developing, building, I can't remember what the language is, mastering, and proficiency, proficiency, right? And so you go through these different stages, and I said, well, let's see if I could rebuild this 100-point rubric with crazy tons of details and see what happens if I put it in here. And so that's basically what I did, is I said, something along the lines of, I'd like to reconstruct this prompt into a 4-point scale. It should be beginning, developing, proficiency, mastery, whatever it was. I wrote it out, all the details, and this is on the link too. But and then I want these 4 criteria of content, organization, language, grammar, drafting, and format and title. And then I uploaded my previous rubric together with it. boom, it was like a matter of seconds, and it built out this whole new rubric. And I was like, I went through it, of course we're responsible for checking the quality of those things. I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. And it would have taken me an hour to figure this out and to go, hey, which details need to go in this lane, which one needs to go into that one. I made a couple of tiny adjustments, and then I followed it up with saying, hey, I need this to be formatted basically for like a Google assignment, and it readjusted that, and then it put it out for me so that I could just download it as a spreadsheet and upload it right into my Google assignments that we use. So I didn't even have to do the steps of like typing it in one at a time. It was just, it was the first prompt makes it, the second prompt organizes it, and then it was a click and an upload right into it. And so then my students are like, okay, great. I am now focusing on building these bigger scales and showing that I have an understanding of these things. And they're not as stressed by like, oh, did I remember to do every single thing inside of here? And, whatever else it is. Now they're getting a holistic sense of like how they're doing. And I have, different submission systems to make it work for them so they can resubmit or whatever. But yeah, it was great. And, then I'm like, okay, well, I've got a bunch of older rubrics that I really need to adjust. And so then you can just kind of go through one at a time. And again, then it makes you sit and reflect on the quality of your rubric, and, which is something we should do more often, and say like, hey, is this communicating our ideas clearly, the needs for the students? We have a tendency to have built something and then just kind of trust it forever, but it's like, no, we need to come back to these things. And so again, that interaction with it gave me the chance to revisit it and see if it's what I'm looking for my students now.
That's so good. And I think to your point of allowing us to even reflect on our rubrics, and I think as AI continues to advance, and our students are, we're going to have guidance. I've got school districts now that are starting to roll this out with students. We're going to have to be looking at our rubrics and reassess what is on that rubric and what might we need to add, or what's no longer needed, because we're in the world of generative AI. I mean, one of the things that I've been talking to teachers about adding on the rubric is just, especially right now, because we're only 2 years in, and I don't think you're going to need it forever, but this idea of just transparent use of AI. If you're using AI somewhere in your assignment, whether it's a massive research project or it's a, something for social studies or whatever it might be, can you just be transparent about your use? Like, it's not that I don't want you to use AI. I just need to know where you used it.
Yeah.
Right. And so this idea of just being transparent, and that goes for me as a teacher as well, to be able to come back to my students and say, I'm transparent in my use, that I used AI to support me in making this lesson today. And I want you to know and give me feedback. Did this work better? Because I was able to put in there, all my kids love the latest Taylor Swift song. Can you somehow make analogies around Taylor Swift that support me in teaching my kids? And getting feedback from them too, of like, I'm trying to leverage this tool to be a better teacher for you.
Right.
I just expect you to be transparent in your use, to say, hey, yeah, I did this research, and you know what? These 2 paragraphs, they were spot on golden. And so, yeah, I leveraged AI and it just said it better than I could. And I don't know what to tell you, teacher. They just said it really well, which is usually how I end up using it. I usually end up just like, I can't say it any better than that. I don't know what to do. Like, that is literally what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry that AI came up with it before I did, but I 100% agree with it. It's going to go in the article or whatever it happens to be. Right. And that, I think, puts us back into that idea of being human centered, right? The idea of, we want to make sure that we and our human capabilities are at the center of using this. And if we know that kids are going to use it, if we know we've all got access to this, then just be transparent. And that doesn't mean you have to use it, but if you're going to, just be transparent in your use. So I'm just seeing a lot of that kind of added to rubrics as well.
Yeah. Well, I add in here too that like the teachers that I've seen that have been successful with using AI are the ones who are talking frankly with their students about it, right? So opening the conversations, being willing to say, hey, this seems weird. Like, did you write this or did you get AI help, right? You're not in trouble for it, but we need to talk about it, because some of these things are skills that you need to build. And some of these things are, do you think this is busy work, right? right? And if you think it's busy work, then how do we have that conversation? The teachers who are not doing that, right, who are saying, hey, there's no AI and we're not going to talk about it, and if you use it, then you're getting in trouble with it, they're struggling in a lot of different ways, right? And I understand the fears and the concerns, so it's not like, it's not trying to be a criticism of it, but it is trying to say like, hey, what happens if you're really saying that you're, student centered, if you're really saying that you're human focused on these things, you can't just throw the humans and the students out of the conversation, right? And so that is a tricky part, because it's very easy for a lot of people to say, well, I just want things to be the way that I've known them and the way that I came up, and then it's like, well, okay, but it is a lot of work for us to make these adjustments, but it is the right thing to do, by our students' needs. And so kind of stepping into a different approach of the learning, having the students be involved in the conversation of their own education is an approach worth taking, but I do admit that it's not easy to do first steps.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Let's talk a little bit as we get ready to wrap up here. You've got a book coming out through ISTE. Congratulations on that. Can you talk a little bit about the book?
Yeah. So I've got a book coming out called EdTech for Multilingual Learners. It's an activity book, so it's meant for teachers, right? To bring technology into their classroom, and part of the goal. So there's activities based on all the different levels. Reading, writing, listening, speaking, vocabulary, and so the idea is that it's meant to introduce teachers to some of these ways that you can use technology in the classroom, and hopefully to be flexible enough to say, hey, this particular thing isn't going to work for me, but I'm going to make some adjustments to figure out how it's going to work for my class. And so part of my intention in the sneakiness of it is to build a little creativity and exploration for the teachers' parts. They can run directly with an activity and say, hey, I'm just going to use this thing right off the bat. Every activity also comes with a slide deck, so that when a teacher pulls up that slide deck, they can make 2 or 3 quick adjustments, present it to their students, and start walking into the activity immediately, instead of like, so it's meant to take away 85% of the prep work for these activities. But then, you start to see, I got to be clear, you don't need technology for every single activity that you do, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to be clear about that in the book, but to say, if you start taking 1 or 2 of these things and it saves you an hour in a semester, or 2 hours for 2 activities, like that's hopefully a good value benefit for everybody. And then hopefully also that it makes their classes a little bit more modern and engaging for their students, where it's like, hey, I want to use this technology, or hey, I want to try something that is kind of more interactive and, less what's the right way to say it, worksheet based, I guess. Right. And so that's kind of the goal of the book, and it should be coming out in spring. We're kind of in final edits right now and design process, so it'll definitely be out before ISTE 25. I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Very cool. And we'll have a link in the show notes, right? You're going to share a link where people can sign up.
Yes. I have so right now it doesn't exist on the ISTE website because it's still being built and everything. They haven't chosen the official release date, but I have a website, or I have a mailing list at brentgwarner.com/book. And you can sign up for my mailing list, and I'll give out, freebies, and we'll do like a book launch stuff where we'll have like webinars and fun stuff that'll come out as we step in, maybe extra chapters, all that type of stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll make sure it links over there as well. I just pulled it up, so we'll make sure that links over there. Perfect. And link to your website and everything else. So appreciate you and appreciate all you're doing, Brent. Really do. Again, we'll make sure there's a link to your LinkedIn. Is there any other place that people should go to get all the latest that you're sharing? Or is LinkedIn? LinkedIn seems to be the place right now, right? Like we all kind of moved away from Twitter, and it just kind of, but LinkedIn seems to be the place at the moment. And it's interesting how the community finds itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on some of these other ones, but I just don't use them as much. I haven't gotten hooked in the way that I have on LinkedIn. And so I you can find me on most platforms at Brent G. Warner, but LinkedIn is where I'm most active. And if you want to talk to me or ask questions, that would be the place to find me for sure.
Awesome.
I am sad with Twitter because my quick thoughts, I don't feel comfortable throwing out quick thoughts on LinkedIn. I'm kind of have to think about what I'm doing and present it that way. But yeah, it's still great. And lots of wonderful teachers are sharing amazing stuff. So I'm pretty happy to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all mourning the loss a little bit of Twitter at this point. It just isn't what it used to be. No. But LinkedIn does seem to be where people are going. So if you are used to using LinkedIn as just a place, to have your professional kind of profile, it has moved beyond that now. And there's just people create really amazing stuff. People are sharing over there, almost like a blog post. I'm over there instead of on my blog. It's my place where I kind of blog now, right? This longer form kind of stuff. And it's not going to replace Twitter, but that's okay. It's a great conversation over there. So I do encourage those of you who are looking for this to go over, to get on LinkedIn. There's just amazing stuff being shared, including by Brent. So, hey, appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Also have your own podcast, the Diesel Podcast, focused on innovation in ESOL. So please go over and subscribe to that. We'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes as well. If you're a podcast listener, it's always great to add other great podcasts to your listening library. So Brent, thank you so much for taking time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.
Hey there, dedicated listener. If you've made it this far, we know you're passionate about shifting the way education works. And Tricia and I appreciate you. If you loved what you heard today, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review Shifting Schools wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings help us reach even more educators just like you. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations, please share this episode with them. Just one person. Think of the impact we can make together. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more great content. And if you haven't already, join us at Camp Shifting Schools, where the conversations keep going long after the podcasts end. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of Shifting Schools.